A small reinforcement against the cold. Of course, cold for me might not be as cold for everybody else, but every little bit helps. Ah, minty. Oh, that way too hot. Way too hot. Gotta let it cool off a little bit. Konnichiwa everyone. Today we're going to be drinking some tea and talking about some tools and talking about some woodworking. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I have been asked about a couple of times on this channel by various people of various varieties, you know, woodworkers and other people. Still too hot. Why do I keep trying to drink that? And anyway, what I wanted to give you guys was some basic tips to do small space woodworking. So that includes people who live in flats if you're in the UK or the East, or apartments if you're in the United States. Pretty much anyone that has a limited amount of space to do woodworking, this video is designed entirely for you guys. Now, if you're familiar with what I do on the channel, I basically only do woodworking in a very tiny space. I have my balcony, and I have this bench here, and that's it. So whatever I do, I have to make the most of the space that I have. So anyway, without further ado, here are some tips that are specifically for you guys and gals in these particular situations. Tip number 1, sell tools. And that's just as simple as it sounds. One thing I've noticed about some folks that get into this kind of hobby is that you kind of go in cycles. You'll start off with something really interesting and you'll want to buy a ton of different tools at a ton of different makers from all sorts of different things, you know, chisels, saws. There is a decent amount to get started up with. But the truth of the matter is that once you buy a bunch of tools, you're going to have to sell some tools because you're going to have tools that you don't use. And my philosophy is that if I don't use a tool within a month, I sell it. Why do I do that? Because I only have so much space to store these tools, so it's not just about the space you use to work, it's also the space you use to, you know, keep all the stuff in good shape. And in all likelihood, you're going to be using the space in which you store your tools for the work, so having a good amount of space to work and store your tools is paramount to working well in a small space. Tip number next, how do I sell these tools? I'm glad you asked. This is called tape, and tape is a wonderful substance because it sticks to things. Now, this particular thing is something I actually picked up from ultralight backpackers. Now, what ultralight backpackers will do is when they're cutting down on their kit, and if you're not familiar, let me backtrack a little bit. So ultralight backpacking is basically where your backpack and everything that you have in it only comes out to weigh about 20 pounds, 15 pounds. The concept behind that is you can actually get a lot more work done with your hike and you're going to be less encumbered, and it's a really great concept to keep in mind, especially with stuff that requires a lot of heavy tools like woodworking. So what the ultralight backpackers will do is they will take, and I'm not speaking for all of them, just the ones I've talked to about this, they will take tape and attach it to each one of their items in their backpack, be it a battery pack or like a flashlight, things like that. And as they're going through their hike or whatever, they will actually take the tape off of the tool as soon as they use it. Or tool or whatever item, you know, use the backpacking reference to apply it to woodworking. And so throughout the trip, they are constantly removing tape off of the items that they are using constantly, and they're leaving the tape on the stuff that they're not using. Now by the end of the trip, you'll actually have a few items that have tape and a few items that don't have tape. What that helps you do, that helps you see which tools and which items you actually used on your trip and the ones that you need to not bring on your next trip, thereby making your pack lighter. Now this is a great concept to apply to woodworking because it's really easy to get caught up in the habit of buying a lot of tools, especially if you see a really good deal here, really good deal there, or oh, this is on sale, or oh, that's on sale too. So as you can see, if you're going through all your stuff, everything has been taped. The tools you actually used had the tape removed on them. So that would mean that the tools that still have tape on them are ones that you're actually not using. So this one would be a good candidate for selling. And I'm not actually going to sell this, I'm just using a visual reference. Visual aids, my friend. And so that trick has helped me a lot to keep from getting over encumbered with all of these tools. And so you can be as aggressive with that or as passive as you want, but that's something that's really helped me to kind of stay focused on what I actually use as opposed to what's just nice to have around. And tip number next is think big in small ways. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you're going to tackle a big project, you can absolutely make huge projects in a very small space. One of the largest projects I ever made was a 6.5 to 7 foot long by 5 foot tall, no, not 5 feet, how tall was that thing? Maybe 6.5 to 7 feet long by about 3.5 to 4 feet tall and 3 feet deep marimba stand, and it was all out of 8-quarter mahogany. I did the entire thing just on the back porch there. What I mean by think big in small ways is this. Don't be afraid to take on a big project, but break it down into smaller bits. Basically, if you're going to eat a hamburger that is a 4-pound monster, nobody takes 4-pound bites. You take maybe a 2 or 3 ounce bite. So you can still take on the big projects, but always be willing to do it slower, do it more deliberately, and write it down. This is something that's really important. And then once you have everything written down, follow the plan. And if you got to modify it, just modify what you're doing as you're going. This is not a super precise craft. You know, woodworking has a lot of space to make things change a little bit. A running theme of what I do here is that, oh, this is a new feature, or, you know, that kind of thing. But never be afraid of the mistakes you're going to make if you can't follow your plan precisely. Plans are meant to be changed. Keep that in mind. Tip the next, everything has a space. Now, what I mean by that is pretty simple. Let's take a plane here, for example. This is going to be one of the larger tools that you're going to have if you're into Japanese woodworking. And if you delve into the rabbit hole just a little bit deeper, you might get one of these. This is called a nagadai kana. This is basically a Japanese jointer plane. And these things are very, very large. This is probably 17 inches long. Now, everything has a place basically means this, that whatever you buy, you have to find a spot for it where you keep it at all times when you're not using it. Every apartment comes with this one simple fact. You pay a premium for more space. So, if you're going to be paying a premium for space, you need to make sure that the space that you have is being used to its absolute best by whatever tools that you have here. So if you buy something, you need to make sure that it has a spot. This chisel has a spot. This hammerhead has a spot. This hammer has a spot. Everything goes in an exact spot in the toolbox or in the cabinet or wherever you store your tools. This is extremely important to your mental health, because if you are hunting around for tools that you have no idea where they're at just because they're splattered all over the place, you're not going to have a very good time with it. And if you're a married man, your spouse is not going to have a very good time with that either, because what makes her happy will also make you happy in the long run. So keep it in mind that you've got to be friendly to your wife or your spouse, whoever. I'm not, not being overly specific here. Just be considerate of the space that you share with your roommates or whoever it is that you have your apartment or flat with. Make sure everything has a spot, and when you're not using it, it goes back to its spot. Tip number next is make friends with your neighbors. What do I mean by that? It's as simple as it sounds. Walk up to your neighbor's door, knock on the door. Or you can do 4 knocks. Whatever. Don't be angry, be very polite. Just make friends with your neighbors, especially if you live in an upper floor. I'm on the 3rd floor, so I actually know my 2nd and 1st floor neighbors by first name basis. They see me around the property, I say hello, they say hello back. Sometimes that's all there is to it. If they know what you're doing and that you're not intentionally trying to disturb them, they will be very happy to oblige you. Also, if you are in this situation where you're on an upper floor, only do your woodworking, especially hammering and chiseling, in certain times of the day, and limit it to a few days a week. My current schedule allows me to have 1 day a week where I can do heavy work such as chiseling and hammering, and I also on that same day only work between the hours of 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Reason I do that, most people are up and about by that time of day. Most people get home around 5 p.m., so I'm not hammering all day long. If you're up at 6 in the morning till about 10 in the morning and you're hammering, I can guarantee you're going to make some people angry. So just keep your neighbors in mind, be friendly to them, and they usually will be very friendly to you. Just always be considerate. It's just, these are basic, living rules with apartments and stuff. It's not that complicated. All right, I think my tea is sufficiently cooled here. Let's see. Yep, that's much better. All right, and number next is, clear some space here for this one. Keep everything in one simple container. Oop, knocking my camera around here. Now, I built this box on the channel almost a year ago, and it's worked really well for pretty much every tool that I've needed for most projects. And I've actually discovered that most of the stuff I build here on the channel, I can build with tools that can fit in this baby here. So this is meant more for you all who live in a very small apartment, like an 800-foot studio. If you wanted to get into this stuff, build yourself a toolbox, and you stay within the confines of that toolbox. If you have to build a bigger box, get rid of the old one. Super simple rule, should keep things flowing nice and smooth. You can fit just about everything you want in this box. Trust me, there is really not a reason to have 150 tools if you're only using 10 of them. Going back to the tape trick, if you get in the habit of buying tools, see if they can fit in the box, and if they can't fit in the box, you don't buy them. Now, like I said, you don't have to stick to this. This is just for those people who are in a very small and very confined space. Steady my camera here. So it doesn't apply to everyone, but for you guys who are in a very tiny space, like I said, 800 square feet and below, this might be a good option for you. Make a box, and whatever doesn't fit in the box, you don't keep. Tip number 8, never overbuy on wood or tools. Now, I've talked about the tool thing before, tape and all that, but wood is a little bit different. Wood takes up a massive amount of space, especially if you're doing a big project. Go back to that writing everything down tip I mentioned before. Figure out your dimensions that you're going to want, and you buy wood that's as close to that as possible. Now what I mean by that is if you don't have the time to sit there and resaw wood, buy pre-dimensioned wood. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You can even buy thin wood if you want and just cut it to shape and do the joinery. There's nothing wrong with that either. You don't have to be so hardcore about it that you're milling your own lumber on your back porch. That doesn't always work for everybody. And not everybody has the space to pull it off. So if you're going to do stuff like that, consider buying stuff that's been pre-cut or pre-milled down to the thickness that you need or whatever length you need. And also save yourself from the noise of having to do even more work than you don't have to. Sometimes it's better to be practical when it comes to big projects. So like I said, think big but in small ways. And one of those small ways you can make your life more bearable is by employing the use of machines or friends who have machines. And the absolute final tip I'm going to leave with you guys today is a very simple one. Keep your spouse happy. Now, what do I mean by happy? Do little things that make him or her happy. That is, take the trash out, do the dishes, clean the house, keep all your stuff in a really good working order. Sometimes if you do a good job at this, they may not even know that you're doing it because you're not going to be leaving your tools laying around. If you're home before your spouse gets home, clean up your mess. If you're not home when they're there, just don't leave your stuff laying all around so they just find, a random chisel or a random hammer in some stupid spot where you left it because you were too lazy to put it back in its box. This is such a simple thing, but it makes life so bearable and so much more fun. Just keep your spouse in mind. Don't do things that, cost you more money than what you make. Just be considerate, be kind. If they are the gift kind of person, consider making them a small gift out of it. It's a really cool way to show you care, but it's also a really cool way to employ the skills you've been learning with the woodworking. And this is just a simple tip. It's not just about woodworking. I mean, it's life in general. Life has lots of stresses and life has lots of ups and downs. And so the last thing you want is for something that you find enjoyable, such as Japanese woodworking or what have you, to become this stress point in your marriage or in your relationships. Remember, family always comes before your hobbies, your tools, all of that. If you can't keep that relationship good while you're doing this, you need to reconsider your priorities. So guys, I hope you found that enjoyable and I hope you found that helpful. I'm going to finish the rest of my tea here. Let's see, it should be about the perfect temp. Oh yeah, that is lovely. Should be good. Peppermint is the best. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you got some good tips out of it. If there's something you got a question about, feel free to leave a comment. And if you feel like supporting content like this, as well as supporting projects that I do on the channel, feel free to check out the Patreon account. Everything I do on the channel here is paid for by the patrons. I don't take any ad revenue. I don't do any of the monetization stuff. So whatever you guys see here, make sure you thank a patron today for it, because they paid for a lot of the tools and a lot of the wood that I use here on the channel. Pretty much, I couldn't do this without the patrons. So patrons, I say thank you. To everybody else, thanks for watching. Hope you guys have an awesome day. Arigatou gozaimasu. Sayonara.